Welcome to Free Media, Free Minds. Free Media, Free Minds is a program that explores media freedom, diversity, and access to information. My name is Phumeza Mdekazi.
And I'm Helga Jansen-Daugbjerg. If you've just joined us, thank you. We are going to be talking about whistleblowers in society. A whistleblower is a person who exposes corruption and illegal activities of not only governments, but corporations. The whistleblower does this in the interest of the public, but also in the interest of building our democracy. To some, whistleblowers may be heroes. To others, they are vilified as troublemakers, people who want to rock the boat. Some of you may be aware of more high-profile whistleblowers in recent times, like Edward Snowden and Bradley Chelsea Manning, who exposed the activities of the American government to the media.
In our program today, we explore how whistleblowers attempt to keep in check the powers of government and corporates in our society. Please join us as we discuss this with our studio panels.
Thank you for joining us. Imran Makadam, whistleblower on the bread cartel. And thank you also to Alison Tilley, Executive Director of the Open Democracy Advice Center. But before we talk, we're going to take a look at the trailer to the film, Crumbs.
In my peak, I was doing about 70 shops a day, distributing over 5,000 loaves of bread a day. Being a shopkeeper was what I grew up with and my children grew up with. Serving this community, whatever I set myself to do, I was able to achieve up until the point where I blew the whistle on these big companies. They hit back quite hard, destroying my business, sabotaging my business basically. I've lost my business, I've lost my bakery, I've lost my bread distribution route, and I'm still stuck with the 700,000 cost order as well.
There are 4 companies. They have 90 to 97% control over the total volume of bread.
There were company directors who sat around the table and decided that they would increase the price of bread.
You know, you should speak to the bread companies themselves. I don't think you need to speak to us.
You have to understand that poorer people spend a larger proportion of their income on food than what wealthy people do.
En ek is die ou nie broodwinner wat nou brood op die tafel kan sit vir kinders.
In South Africa, we have it in one country, the most unequal country on the planet currently.
You wouldn't expect a gentleman in a pinstripe suit to slip into shacks on the Cape Flats and take a slice of bread, but that is the effect of what is happening.
How do you steal from poor people? The last crumbs, how do you justify that? How do they sleep at night?
I haven't got nothing sorry for that answer. I got nothing, but okay, I see for myself that piece of dry bread. It's alright for me.
You have about 20 senior councils representing a few big companies. Then you have 3 lawyers representing millions of people.
And I'm prepared to take this case right up to the Constitutional Court to show how unfair the system is.
What can we do? What can we do? This is a critical question. The first thing is to getting angry, get pissed off.
Our only solution is going to be the uprising.
Niemand, ons moet vir die dinge wat baie belangrik is soos die pryse en die brood.
The fight for economic justice will continue. The political movement that is confronting capitalism internationally is bigger than this building, it's bigger than this cause, it's bigger than Imran Makadam.
Imran, that was really powerful, and personally I can't wait to watch it. And clearly your story and your journey is what the film portrays. But before we get to you, Alison, we have to ask, what is the role of whistleblowers in our society, in South Africa?
Well, I think the role of whistleblowers is sometimes a more hidden one and sometimes a more public one. In every organization, there are people who step forward and talk about irregularities things that are not procedural, things that are going wrong, that don't feel right. And in many cases, they are answered and those things are fixed. So I think we shouldn't forget that. Of course, what we see mostly in the public domain is where people have not been listened to. And the whistleblowers under those circumstances are the people who are then coming out publicly and saying, there is a problem, I'm not being heard, it has to be fixed.
What are the kinds of questions that people blow the whistle on? The kinds of issues?
Well, there's a very wide range of issues in terms of our legislation. I think sometimes people think it's only about fraud. It's only about when you steal money from a company. But it's much broader than that. It's the kind of corruption that Imran blew the whistle on. It's health and safety issues. It's concerns around the environment. So the legislation itself is very broad. And in terms of that legislation, if you do blow the whistle in the employment context, you are then protected.
Imran, what were your thoughts? Take us through the whole process.
Oh, yeah, it was quite a traumatic process in terms of, making this decision. But also the impact of not speaking out was more severe. So in terms of what the impact was, not only on me personally, but on broader society, the fact that the price of bread was being raised, and the impact of that would have been an increase of up to between 60 cents and R1 per loaf of bread at the time.
Can I just ask him for our viewers at home, Imran, you owned a bakery. Is that where your journey started?
I started as a bread distributor, and then I sort of started baking my own bread as well. But in essence, my primary business was distribution of bread. I started producing a lower cost bread in terms of just looking after a market segment that wasn't being looked after by the more mainstream commercial bakeries. So in terms of my bakery function wasn't really...
I have to ask, market segment, what you're saying, poorer communities, who were you distributing to?
I was distributing primarily in the poorer communities, in your squatter camps, in your lower income areas, informal traders, spaza shops. So that was the core of my business. And the impact of these price increases that was brought about through the price fixing was that my clients were going to pay a lot more for bread than they were paying before. And I just had to take a position that, you can't expect poor people to pay so much more for bread all of a sudden just because you had the opportunity to get together and fix the prices.
Now, for those who don't know, what did you discover?
What I discovered was that they, firstly, they put up the price of bread almost at the same time by the same amount. And then also they reduced the distributor's commission by the same amount. All three major bread producers.
Who are they?
They are Premier Foods,
which
trades as Blue Ribbon Bread, Tiger Brands, which trades as Albany, and Pioneer Foods, which traded as Sasco and Dunes. So those were the three, and they together had a monopoly of more than 70% of the bread market at the time. So there was nowhere else to go, and because of the entrenched monopoly that they had, that they were able to, put up the price of bread and know that they could get away with it and actually extract that extra profit and value out of the poorest of the poor.
So, Alison, how does ODAC help Imran as a whistleblower? He's discovered this, he's uncovered this. What is his next step?
Well, I think the one of the issues that the ODAC deals with as a specialist policy organisation is really to take up the fact that the law does not protect Imran. And I think that's one of the key things that we have to, say front and centre, is that the legislation was designed to protect people in the workplace. So it was generally thought that you would be in the workplace, you'd blow the whistle on your employer, and then you'd be trying to deal with whatever the employer did to you. Now, this is a different situation. This is a situation where you have companies with which you have a contractual relationship, who are then victimizing and harassing you. And the legislation simply doesn't provide for that.
Well, can I just ask you, victimizing and harassing, if you don't mind, I want to just ask Imran, did you experience this? Was there, when you first uncovered all of this?
Yes, very directly. I had spoken to the bakeries about the fact that I knew that they were price fixing, and I then approached Maureen Marud of the Argus, and she had a column called Argus Action. And when the Argus Action column came out on the 15th of December in 2006, the 16th of December my bread supply was cut, and the bakeries immediately stopped. One bakery stopped supplying me the very next day, so it had an immediate impact on my business.
Okay, Alison, so Imran's come to you, and the legislation wasn't catching up with the fact that there was a different permutation of how people were whistleblowing.
Well, I think that is the main issue that we are concerned about at the moment, and I think I hesitate to say that Imran got off lightly, because he clearly didn't. You know, he's suffered enormous personal loss, financial loss in relation to this, and has nevertheless continued to speak out. But I think we have to recognize that more and more whistleblowers are not just suffering detriment outside of the workplace, but they're also literally being subject to physical harassment, threats, and in a number of cases we know of assassinations. So we're having to really rethink what the framework is that we use to protect whistleblowers. We have a whistleblower law in place, and did it work for Imran? No. So that's really where we have to take the issue up now, is to say that there isn't a legal avenue at this point, and there must be.
Sorry, please hold that thought. We'll come back to it when we get back from the ad break. You tuned into Free Media, Free Minds, and we're going to take a short break. Please stay with us.
You're back with Free Media, Free Minds, and we're talking whistleblowers. What is their role in society? Before the ad break, Alison, you were talking to us about the legislation and about the conditions under which people find it in themselves to whistleblow.
I think one of the stories that touches me most, I think, is the story about Mos Pakwe, who blew the whistle on corruption. He was a local councillor, and he raised concerns at the highest level. And in 2009, he was murdered. And his killers, who have been identified and been found guilty, are still out on bail. You can imagine what that means for his family. And the corruption that he raised, the issues that he was concerned about, hasn't actually been investigated and dealt with. So I think we have to recognize that the framework that we have for recognizing whistleblowing, protecting and supporting whistleblowers, and doing something about the concerns they raise, that framework is wholly inadequate.
What does it take, and Imran, maybe the question should be to you, what does it take to blow the whistle? Because from knowing your background also, it must have been a tremendous stress on your family, but what made you decide to blow the whistle?
Yes, it does have an immediate impact, like I explained earlier. And it does put enormous stress on family relations. And you realize that this position that you're taking will have dire consequences, and in many cases it does. In the case that Alison mentioned, the whistleblower was actually assassinated. And we know of many cases. Bradley Chelsea Manning is being, he's been given life sentence. So you find that society and laws and government that are in power, they don't really have an interest in protecting whistleblowers, because whistleblowers, as much as we believe, are there to change the essence of our society in terms of transparency and accountability. They normally pay the price for that, and you don't see immediate change. The change comes about through the consciousness that is being raised. If you look at people like Ken Saro-Wiwa, that is speaking out against the oil, he's one of my heroes, but he was executed. You look at throughout history, people that take a position, and that's where you get your inspiration from, is that it's not about you. If it becomes about you, then there's a problem with your ethos. But if it's about taking a position and being prepared to make that sacrifice for the greater cause, then the whistleblowing becomes part of a process of transformation and changing in society that's needed.
I have to ask, because during the break we were talking about the concept and the idea behind the term whistleblowers. And listen, doesn't it have a little bit of a negative connotation attached to it? Because Imran is talking about that it's about your moral compass, I think, and where you find yourself in relation to issues of social injustice. And yet whistleblowers, they're the people that kind of rock the boat.
I think we have a particular history around that in South Africa. And I think if you look at the words that we use, like impimpi and verklikker, you hear how negative the attitude is to people who do this. And whistleblower is a term that we're using at the moment. In other jurisdictions, they try using words like truth teller. In Dutch, you talk about the person who rings the bell, more in the sense of the church bell rather than the whistleblower. So there are ways that you can try and frame the concept positively, but I think we have to recognize that through history, people who speak out against power are not welcome. They're just not welcome. And any label you attach to them is going to be one which attaches stigma.
So there is a level of stigmatization attached to it, and personal almost responsibility that you have to take.
Imran, I believe there's a lawsuit that's been instituted against the bread cartel. Can you please tell us why is this?
Well, we've come a long way. We've come a long way since 2006 when I initially initiated this action. What happened in 2010 is we started a class action, or a process of class action, and the first two legs we lost in the Cape High Court. We lost the first case and the appeal, and then we took it to the Supreme Court of Appeal. The one portion of the case prevailed at the Supreme Court of Appeal, and it was said that there would be a legitimate class action on behalf of consumers that were negatively affected. But in terms of the bread distributors, even the Supreme Court of Appeal upheld the High Court's decision that we did not qualify as a class and we couldn't take a case forward as a class action. And I sort of felt very disgruntled about that. I thought we'll take this thing to the Constitutional Court, and we got a favorable outcome at the Constitutional Court.
How many, is it individuals or is it other organizations or part of the class action suit?
Well, in the consumers case, there's four organizations. It's the COSATU Western Cape, the Black Sash, the Children's Resource Centre, and the organization that I represent, National Consumer Forum, and then also 5 individuals that make up the class action on behalf of the consumers. In terms of the bread distributors, I was one of 3 class representatives that was going to take forward a class action. But what this has actually achieved in terms of the legislative process is that we now have a procedure, we have precedent, and we have judgments that sets the way for class action. So class actions now becomes the way that we use collective litigation. So whistleblowing is then directly affected in how a process can unfold, because a whistleblower could essentially be a class representative on behalf of people similarly affected and take forward through class action a court case that could help, remedy the situation.
Is the fact that collectives of people are taking on the big instances of corruption in our society, is that going to affect the review of the legislation as you were speaking about during the break? Because right now, the legislation does not protect you if you are not in a place of employment, basically.
Well, I think what we've seen is that the competition legislation provides some of a framework, but in terms of the way that the legislative framework needs to be reviewed, it has to be the situation that you, as the whistleblower, are not only entitled to compensation in your workplace, but you have to be entitled to compensation if you're not an employee. And also that we have to have some mechanisms for providing security for whistleblowers. No good giving people damages, money, money at the end of the day if they've lost their lives or, that those circumstances have come to pass. So we really have to look at that as well. It's a huge victory. I think, it's all credit to the organizations and the individuals involved. I think it's going to be a very important way of combating this kind of corporate corruption. But I think we really are going to have to look at more than case law and precedent and actually revise the legislative and policy framework.
I want to ask just before we wrap up, what role in both your experiences has the media played? And has the media been positive in helping to uncover some of this? Or have they, in more cases, perhaps just sensationalized the issue? Imran and then Alison.
Well, I think in terms of my specific case, the media was my biggest ally. And using the media effectively was what actually creates the kind of public sentiment that we got and the outcry that we got. So a lot of credit goes to people like Maureen Marud, who broke the story in the first place. And then a lot of journalists really took the story quite personally because they are consumers and they're also directly affected, or they have family that's directly affected. So we do, as a society, need the media to play this role as well of being the whistleblower and the watchdog. The media has a very crucial role in that. And so there has to be this continuous alliance between media and whistleblowers, because without the media support, the whistleblower has nowhere to run to. And that has to be even strengthened in terms of media policy, and we have to find media decision makers encouraging more whistleblowing, but also in terms of the culture and values that we have to educate our children to have inquiring minds, to question status quo, to question authority, and only through that kind of society and a media that encourages that kind of thinking can we really cultivate a society that holds itself to account.
I think the media can be your greatest ally, and I think they certainly have been in this case, and they certainly keep the issues bubbling under and give you information about what's happening. But at the end of the day, only knowing what is happening is not actually making the change. And I think that that's the key, is that you have to move from the information to the advocacy, information to action. And I think that that's really one of the key things, is that you have to have the action to protect the whistleblower, get the damages, get the relief, keep them safe. And I think that's where we don't have a lot of capacity in civil society or in government or in business. And we have to build that capacity if we're going to keep our whistleblowers safe.
Oh. Imran, I want to ask you, what do people do if they have a burning issue in their place of work, in their community, in their relationship with local government, that they feel needs to be exposed? What should they do?
Well, I think there's a lot of civil society institutions that's now come to the fore, like Corruption Watch. I would advise ODAC would be a good place to go to. And then your community advice centers as well. That would be a good place to start, just to find out what's happening. My advice to whistleblowers is try and stay in as anonymous as possible. And don't make your frustrations known publicly unless you're taking it through a formal route. But exposing yourself doesn't really help much, because in most cases you'll be victimized, and a lot of whistleblowing is actually not taken to the full extent because of the pressure and victimization. So the advice I would give is actually try and remain as anonymous as possible.
Alison, so now I'm anonymous, I have an issue. How would ODAC protect me? I know you've spoken a lot about, but if I come to ODAC, what are they able to do for me? And do you also assist people in discerning whether an issue is worthy of whistleblowing or whether it's just about, I don't like my boss?
We have a limited advice capacity, but what we are able to do is generally explain to people what their options are. And I think that's something that's very important to remember. Your option can be to remain anonymous, it can be to go to the media. You can also take some thoughtful steps around building a circle of support around you. And I think that's incredibly important and often underestimated, whether it's your faith or your family or your community, wherever your source of strength is, that's going to be incredibly important for you. And you have to think about it carefully and plan it. It's not something you should just do impulsively and overnight and make a quick decision. Get advice, think about it carefully, consult, and then do whatever you think is best for you. And I think sometimes you have to accept that maybe it's not the right time, you need to wait. But I think you've always got to remember that you have to stay alive, you have to stay okay for the story to come out.
As we're advising people on the steps to take, would you say that doing things in a collective is perhaps the safer option?
Oh, I would completely endorse that. I think that one of the interesting mechanisms we're seeing now is people using their unions. So they don't come forward directly, but they go and speak to their shop steward, they speak to people in the unions, and the union takes the issue up as part of the collective bargaining process. That's very effective in keeping people safe.
We want to say thank you very much to our guests for a very thoughtful discussion. Indeed, it does indicate the level of responsibility that we have in our society for maintaining the transparency in our democracy, but it's also a very, very tenuous road to travel, as Imran can attest to. So the next time you have a social issue, an issue that is burning, as Alison says, do it in the collective, do it anonymously, but do it. You've been watching Free Minds, Free Media. I'm Helga Jansen-Daugbjerg.
And I am Phumeza Mdekazi. We'll see you next time on Free Media, Free Minds.